Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. We are back again on Science and the Paranormal. Today, we have an incredible guest with us, Jacob Cooper. Have you ever asked yourself a question? Is there a life after death? Is it possible to experience death and not die at the same time? Moreover, to see what is beyond the veil. Well, we have an incredible guest, and he is going to help us see beyond that veil. Welcome, Jacob.
Thank you, Dr. Yana. It's a pleasure to be here on your program, The Science and the Paranormal. I love it.
Thank you, thank you. I know that you have written books.
Yes, well, I'm a two-time published author, and my first book, Life After Breath, came right during the pandemic, in the heat of it, when a lot of people were spiraling out. And for me, I just decided to use that as a period to just focus on my dreams and what I wanted to do. And that's when I published my first book. And around 3 years later was when my second book, The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder, came out. So I absolutely love, writing books and hearing the feedback from people and the emails. And it's just a great way to build community and to give back also what we were, I'm sure, given. It's like, for all of us, I'm sure we had that dark night of the soul period, or that quest for knowledge and just uncertain. And we'd pick up a book and that would transform our lives. And certainly that happened to me. And I said, it's not just about taking, you want to give back what you were given. And that's why I decided to write books, just to really give back to those moments. And, I've been able to find people who feel that same way, get that same relief from reading, both of my books, which is great to hear.
Now, how did you come to this topic particularly? I know that you just mentioned the dark night of the soul, and many of us, of course, we go through it, but we don't exactly know how to define it, of course. However, how did you get to that? Evidently, you had that dark night of the soul. You experienced that. You went through it and you came out of it and you published your books. So, what happened that led you to this incredible research that you have done?
Yeah, I mean, I think with all of our lives, there's periods where we could have these shake up periods and decide to wake up or just ignore, some of those signs. You know, Obviously, my life has a much different trajectory. Well, not obviously, but those who haven't heard my story wouldn't know this. But my life has a much different trajectory than most, in a sense that I had a profound near death experience at just the age of 3 years old. And so when people hear near death experience, they often focus on the euphoric elements, and there's a bit of potential envy or jealousy that could come from that. But for my sake, it was a double-edged sword, where on one hand, yes, I had this beautiful crossing over experience bliss in heaven and the awareness that we can't die. But at the same time, on a human level, it was quite complicated, given the traumatic experience that I had, a suffocation at such a young age, combined with, you know, what are kids taught? We're taught that you're a kid, and you have a name and you have parents, and you kind of go on this, egoic development. And when I had this near death experience, I just knew that I was those things, but I wasn't those things. I was an infinite, eternal soul. And so it was hard for me to play that role when I was able to see the entire cast of the play, and so to speak, and understand what it was about. But trauma was a big part of my life, and at the time, when you're a kid, you don't even know what that means.
And at
Uh,
the age of 3.
no, but thankfully, I was able to really work with therapists at a very young age, who helped me with a lot of my traumatic, uh, traumatic presentation, I would say, and helped me get through it. So I think we are all, at the end of the day, brothers and sisters keeper. And if you have something to share, then you have to really get it out there, because you just don't know who's watching, who's listening, who could benefit from your words.
You had to grow up fast.
I had to grow
What?
up real fast. I was an adult in a kid's body, in a way. And I saw things that people wait the entire lifetime at the end, and I saw that at 3 years old. So that was, an interesting trajectory. Normally, at the end of life, you see these things when you cross over. But for me, the beginning of life was when I saw those things. So it's kind of interesting.
So you were 3 years old, and the experience was so traumatic and profound that you remembered it all to write about it later on.
Oh yeah, and I think there's a lot of misconception of trauma. I mean, some people think trauma just as a disassociative thing that you can't remember. That is a component of it, as a protective mechanism for ourselves if something is too heavy. But in my state condition, it was clear recollection, and I think that was quite a gift that I was able to remember this for myself and others to hopefully remember who we are, where we come from, where we're connected to. So uh, that was one of the post-traumatic gifts that I had, was the ability to remember something incredible that I'll never let go of for the rest of my life and for all of eternity.
So, Jacob, what happened to you?
Yeah, in the short, I had a condition called pertussis, otherwise known as whooping cough. At the time, it wasn't known. I went to a playground. I climbed onto a ladder, onto a slide. I got into this coughing spree. I just began to completely suffocate as a result of pertussis. I wasn't able to breathe or hold on to anything. And it was just the scariest moment of my life, hands down. And just imagine like you're drowning, you're, sinking slowly, and you're wanting to grab onto something. You want to get up for air, but you can't. And that was occurring to me. And so I just, left my body because my body was totally suffocated. And then really, I was able to feel my brain. And I saw that my brain was just deprivated of oxygen. And then it just literally snapped in half. And once my brain, I felt it crack in half, that's when the spirit realm and God came in, as that good old euphemism, says, that my brain cracked open and God came in. And that's when everything opened up and I had a full crossing over experience on the other side that included, awareness of my spirit guides, angels, God, soul family, remembrance and recollection of past lives. And, why I was here as a
No,
soul,
no,
but was
no,
some.
Jacob, at the if we go back just a little bit, so at the age of 3, did you already know what God was? Did your parents talk to you about it? Or actually, when that happened, that experience took place, you did not know who those entities were, or you were able to identify them?
I'm sure, in a sense, most kids or children have a lot of more recollection than most adults. When you think about it, you're just coming back from the other side. So your degree of forgetfulness isn't as strong as some adults. I think a lot of people intellectualize adults, intellectualize God when they're adults, but they don't really
Mhm.
know it, in their hearts or in their intuition. So in many ways, the young are the old, in some ways, the old are the young because of degree of forgetfulness. And kids oftentimes very matter of fact or remember things like past lives and who they were in other lifetimes. And usually by the age of, 5 or 6, some of that stuff gets lost in translations. But to preface this, I want to be very clear, what I say, that I don't believe any of us are chronological age in the grand scheme of things. We're experiencing that, in this form, but beyond that, we're all eternal, infinite souls that goes beyond, linear time. And so that's what I really experienced. My near-death experience, this was an experience of my soul, in the eternal awareness that I had, not just, the 3-year-old kid, you know, that wasn't my full story. That was maybe a page or two, in my book, but that wasn't the full story.
That is so incredibly interesting because a lot of the people, they cannot recall what happened, or they could forget, or they would be even confused for the experience.
Mhm.
Now, how long were you gone before they brought you back?
I asked my parents this all the time. I know I was rushed by the ambulance to the hospital, in terms of how long I was out. I'm not sure. There's certainly a lot of panic. And when you're panicking, you're not looking at your wristwatch to time things. It was just a lot of hysteria and panic because I wasn't responsive during those moments. But, obviously I'm here today and, survived death and to really state that there is no such thing, as death in the grand scheme of things. It's just going from one room to the next. But in terms of timing, that wasn't there. But certainly in the near death experience, it kind of felt a little bit like, if you watch you've read the book by C.S. Lewis called The Chronicles of Narnia, when they go into the wardrobe and they feel like they're aging for thousands of years, and they grow up and all of a sudden they come back and it's as if nothing, time has ever passed. That's kind of how it felt when I was in heaven, where there was just this timelessness and it felt like I was there forever. And in linear time, it was probably only a couple hours, that I was, out of awareness and stuff like that. And, and so it was quite profound.
And also, as a therapist, you were also hypnotherapist.
Yes. Yeah.
So
I
you're
do.
very much aware of the passage of time, that it is not linear, and how to manipulate time.
No. And it's just kind of comical how people take time so seriously. That's very much a human construct. But on the other side, I learned, much like many other near death experiencers, that there is really no such thing as time. It would be like air and trying to chop up air and thinking that you're doing something with it. It's just, but again, that's what we need in this earth. It's about order. It's about structure. That's how we're governed in many ways, but it doesn't reflect, the ultimate truth, when you're on the other side, that there is a certain timelessness. But yes, I do practice hypnotherapy, and a lot of the work that I do is related to my near death experience, but hypnosis in a way allowed me to try to give as much as I can back to other people, just to remind them that they have so much inside of them, so many memories inside of them, and the empowerment to connect to that, which is such a different form of trajectory than when we were children. When we were kids, we're told that power, wisdom, knowledge is in the hands of the few, but not the many, and it's in someone else, but not ourselves. And so hypnosis, in a way, is kind of getting out of our own way and surrendering, to this higher mind, this higher awareness. And it depends on what type of hypnosis. But lately, I've been doing a lot of regression therapy, which, is pretty fascinating to see what unfolds and what comes out, within the client sessions.
Did you ever think that, had you not experienced that clinical death, and so what was on the other side, you would have ever gotten into the hypnosis?
Who knows? I mean, I come from three generations of therapists. And so my dad studied in hypnotherapy too. He's a therapist. So I think probably I would have, but I don't know if I would be who I am today exactly. There's an undeniable uh, association with who I am today and my near death experience. It's, heavily influenced in my life. And I know so many others where you can't, how could you be the same person after seeing all those things? It's very hard to. And there's transformation that occurs in nearly every near death experiencer, usually for the good within time if it's properly processed. But yeah, I mean, it's just it's just funny how we walk around with our blinders on, thinking that this is reality, that we're just this body, this name, this gender, this race. All these things within our human construct, or what we call the ego, it could be true in one sense, but in the ultimate sense, we are so much more than what we could imagine, and connected to so much more, than we understand.
That's true. And it also probably, that I can assume that it was not as easy growing up, because children, most of the time, they have different interests. And of course, that not having experienced what you did, the nonchalant behavior is prevalent, of course. And you having gone through this profound experience and knowing what you did, probably was difficult to connect with other children growing up.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was, one of five kids, and I was hands down the biggest pain in the what out of all the kids. And we all had the same food, the same home, and sure, there's a black sheep in nearly every family, but yeah, I was definitely a rebel early on, and with cause, just a lot of things did not make sense, and I just had intuition that I connected to.
Hmm.
What do you want most kids to do is just to fall into line, to be able to control your kids. You don't, very few parents want to allow their kids to just unfold. Many times they want carbon copies of themselves, or self replications, and they can't accept that maybe a kid is unique or different, and trying to learn from them instead of trying to imprint, your stuff onto them. So,
But if
you
you
know,
were coming from the family of therapists, they probably supported you to some degree, or still not.
yeah, absolutely. It was a great home, no question. But at the end of the day, it was just hard to accept that role as a kid, knowing that I wasn't that, and people saw me as a kid, but I just knew this is something that I'm experiencing. But I am timeless. I'm ageless. I'm not just this little body that you're seeing. There's a lot more to the surface, and I think two things can be true at the same time. But a lot of kids, I think, are defined because they just know in their hearts that they are not that. They're experiencing themselves as this kid, but beyond that, they're a timeless soul, and so it might be hard to accept starting over again in this human life, and this journey, and accepting like a new start is hard. Think about it. It's like taking an old person, just saying, all right, you're going to be a kid again. It's hard. We climbed the mountain, now we have to start off at the beginning. It's not easy.
That's for sure. I know that you have written about the Jacob's Ladder. So
Mhm.
interesting that Jacob wrote about the Jacob's Ladder. Now, this is the biblical story that a lot of people are familiar with. What is your Jacob's Ladder story is about?
Yeah, it's just kind of like a play on words or allegory with my own name. But Jacob's ladder was similar to my near-death experience. If you study, Jacob from the Bible, he was, running from his life. His life was in danger due to his brother's frustration with him getting the covenant and jealousy from his father, and so he ran, away. And his brother was chasing him, and he, dreamt, and he had a, he went to sleep, and when he went to sleep on a bed of rocks, he saw angels going up and down a ladder. And so when death was in front of him, he was able to see eternity and the angels going up and down the ladder. And then, more to it, where he had like kind of like the angel of death. And then he kind of wrestled it, and then eventually he became Israel. He went from Jacob to Israel, through that period. But similar to Jacob, I was on a ladder in the playground, and so that there's the analogy or the allegory of my experience, and there's a lot of symbology with my entity in the playground, but certainly that that's one of them. But what do you think of a ladder? What do you really think of? You think of something touching the earth and then going up to the heavens, to the sky. And I think, and there's different rungs on it, and so to me it represents the different stages of evolution, of growth, of awareness, and the higher rungs that you were on, the more aware you are. And I think that's what lifetimes are about, is just to continue to ascend in awareness, and to have a uniformity in what we know and who we are, and what we're able to apply. Because I think souls have an all-knowingness to them, but it's like once we start to apply this, we become what's innate, what we know. It's like I could know about swimming, but until I get into the pool, what does it mean? So as souls, we know this stuff, but it's life is about the application of all these things that we know. And in the simplest form, that we're infinite, eternal souls. Certainly that we don't die, but reminding ourselves who we all are, which is the interconnected woven parts. That isn't separate from each other, and how we have responsibility to elevate our surroundings.
What is profound in the story of the Jacob's Ladder and
Yeah.
your story at the same time, it is very similar to, of course, to a near-death experience, because
Hmm.
what is the story of the Jacob, right? That he was put in the state of the profound sleep. That was the state of the deep, deep
Hmm.
sleep. And in the Bible, it comes just a handful of times. Essentially, God does not put people into this deep sleep unless there is an incredible need. And for Jacob, evidently, it was also associated with some sort of state of death,
Mm.
just like what you did and people do with the near death experiences. Essentially, that is a state of deep sleep, because you came back, and people who lived through that NDEs, then they come back and they live to tell about the stories,
Hmm.
their stories, of course. So, what do you think? Um, is the meaning of that deep sleep state?
Hmm. Well,
What is
you
the
could look at it.
significance of it?
You could look at it, for many ways. I mean, for one thing, the when you think of deep sleep, in human terms, we're usually in the delta waves, and when people have near-death experiences, they usually don't even have even brain waves. So it just shows you, how there's a deeper mind, versus the brain. How the brain does not produce the mind is just filtered through the brain. But, I think in reality, it speaks of how many people are, living in a state of, are asleep right now. And near death experiences, in a way, waken people up to remind people who they are, why they're here. I think there's a spiritual disconnect that people have in their lives, and they're more immersed in materialism and versus their spiritual truths. And so near death experiences are that gentle tap on your shoulder to remind us who we are, why we're here, what this life is about, that things are just not random unfolding circumstances, that there's reasons, there's intelligence, there's purpose driven behind all of life itself. And so I think it has to do more so, actually I would say more so, with the world around us. um, Near death experience to me are awakened experience when you're,
So we
I would say.
essentially need to be put the knocked out unconscious in order for us to stop and ponder the reality.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are already knocked unconscious. I don't think they have to do that. That's already happened to so many people, but slowly but surely people are waking up, from this kind of deep slumber, and waking up from this dream that we're in, and recognizing that there's an ultimate reality more so than what we've been told. So people are starting to explore and starting to wake up a little bit, and starting to remember who they are, why they're here. Yeah.
Now, how is that symbology of the Jacob's ladder is playing out in your story and your own personal near-death experience? You mentioned that you met the God, the spirit guides,
Mhm.
and others. Could
That's
you
right.
elaborate on that a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like I said, when you think of biblical Jacob, you think of the angels going up and down the ladder, and that's what he connected to. And similar to me, I saw my own guardian angels, my own spirit guides, to myself during this near death experience, as well as encounters with hundreds of angels that were floating right in front of me, and, what was interesting when I had my NDE was the angels didn't feel far away from this planet. They were like right here over us. So it's like you take a little dial and you just turn it just a little bit. This filter of angels are all around us. We just don't see them as much because we're very kind of dense and our vibrations are a little bit slower, and there's some barriers with our senses. But angels are among us, and I saw that loud and clear right in front of me, where I just had to pinch myself because they were literally floating right in front of my awareness. And it was awesome. It was amazing, and I'll never forget what I saw. That beautiful filter of angels that was just right over this reality. But that's certainly a parallel. But my book really, when you think of a ladder, you think of different rungs, and so a lot of my book is based off of different lessons from the hereafter to the here now. So we don't have to die to go to heaven. In other words, we could implement a lot of that awareness in our everyday lives, and it's just a different dichotomy to look at, God, because I think so many people, have such a poor interpretation, or I think a lot of people are getting God all wrong. And I think beliefs are playing such a pivotal role in conduct and behaviors. And, that's the important thing, is to make sure that our beliefs are rooted, in truths that are in the depths of all of our hearts that are universal.
Well, we all have essentially different understanding of what God is, and also, of course, from the religious perspectives and our personal perspectives. But and also different representations of what angels look like. What did you see exactly? What did they look like?
you know, the spirit guides were different than the angels. The spirit guides had a lot more human characteristics to
Hmm.
them. It was a male and female, spirit guide that we have. And to preface, we have, I'm sure many, we could accrue many different spirit guides within this lifetime, but the spirit guides that I'm speaking of are the primary spirit guides, the spirit guides that are with us before we get here, before we're born, and they help out our blueprint within this life. And just imagine, in terms of spirit guides, like the most beautiful being that you could possibly imagine. Imagine that times a billion. They were just absolutely gorgeous. And I just like can't describe how beautiful the spirit guides were when I saw them to the right side and the left side of me. But the angels that I saw were very youthful in their presentation. They were almost kind of like childlike in what I saw, and they had no concept of self. They were very uniformal. They weren't like different kind of energies versus my spirit guides or personas. They were very uniformal, and they were just basically there to send love, to send healing, to send warmth to all the planet. And so what I really learned from the guides is just how in many ways this life is kind of like a training school to be a spirit guide, in a sense that yes, in order to give, we have to receive, but a lot of it is having investment in another, learning how to see another as not a part of yourself, that someone else's success is something that we need to, be a champion of and to root behind, and to not see ourselves as separate from someone. Within our world, there's so much scarcity and people fighting for, the limited slices on the pie, and just not being able to enjoy abundance and success for someone else. So, really, I learned the beauty, not just physically of the angels, but just in terms of what they represent, just kind of selflessness and giving without expecting anything in return.
Yes, so this exact point of view and the stance is not very popular because as a dog-eat-dog world,
Yeah.
there's so many people that would not just even forget about humanity and human part of themselves, but they wouldn't even have it in the first place. They don't even have that frame of reference.
No.
Uh, and speaking about waking up for these people, probably something profound need to happen in their lives in order to understand that there is a different realm to that. And we are put here essentially to this earth to be guides for other people and to minimize the suffering. Uh, in most cases, and I've noticed through people, you personally, and then other people who are writing about their experiences, they have come to the conclusion that being here is to be here for other people, is to be of service to humanity and not only to take. That is not a popular opinion, of course, not a popular way of life. But nevertheless, if we don't talk about it, the world will be a sadder place.
Mm. Oh, sure. And, again, information is so pivotal in our beliefs, and we've been fed a lot of information. And you look at our beliefs and you look at our patterns of behavior. And so that's why it's important to get out accurate information that's not represented from something that's hand me down, but something that is represented in truths that go beyond this reality, that stretch this reality, and to bring down those truths here. So that's really the emergence of heaven and earth, is living in accordance with principles of heaven here in this earth. And so that's the gift of many people who've had transformative experience and come back different, and that's because they just remember the greater truth in what they've been told. And the lack of separation that we have with people, and we have oneness all the time, and people say, well, someone's not the same as me, how could they be one? And I say oneness does not mean sameness. It just means, despite some of the surface differences that we have, we find a way to connect and to see the interconnected woven of phyla that we all do share, despite being programmed to told that we are totally separate and different and enemies and fearful of one another.
Well, having had that profound experience, and of course, pondering and uh, thinking a lot on the rules that you said that of the heaven that needed to be implemented here on earth, what is your understanding on of the reasons why there are powerful groups of people that want to keep people separated and
Hmm.
not united.
Yeah, I mean that's something that's been going on for thousands of years. It's nothing new, but it's just a mechanism of control. When you take away independent thought and capacity for people to challenge, roles and authority, then you're in a really really good spot, a good position. I mean, obviously, for instance, if I look at Christianity, the reincarnation was a part of Jesus's teachings, but that was banned and then was it 200 or 300 AD by Constantinople. And you ask yourself why. Well, what does the church want? It wants complete control, but it also wants, at the time, people to be fear based, to say that, there's purgatory, there's hell. And so if you have reincarnation come into place, what does that tell you? That says you have other opportunities. This isn't all there is, and we go on. So in a way, that's a threat, to their desire to control the masses through fear, of purgatory, of hell, and those kind of things. And that's just one small example of things. But
Because
you know,
nowadays, if we hear all those teachings, we hear that all the ideas of reincarnation and also the astrology, they are all coming from the evil one, from Satan. And we need to
right.
be fearful of that and not step into that, of course. And no one really thinks or even dives deep enough to even check what was the original concept there. Was the uh, reincarnation main part of the teachings of Jesus, or
Mhm.
perhaps that it wasn't. Nobody wants to study the history in order to think for themselves. And of course, at the Nicene Council in 325, that's uh, a lot of the books were ruled out. Of course, a lot of them did not get into the Bible as we know it now. And again, there's so many different Bibles containing different numbers of books
Mhm.
and the different kinds of books, of course. And we're not talking about the apocryphal books now.
Mhm.
So that is the probably the matter of control even now, to tell people don't go there.
Mhm.
It's you are going to be enlightened, don't go there, you're going to think for yourself,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, look, even in the religion that I grew up, they would say don't study Kabbalistic teachings because they said that you have to have a certain degree of studies to do that, and I'm just like, why the heck not? What's the danger? It's like almost like they're afraid of mysticism or spirituality, to be a part of their religion because that could take away the dogmatic emphasis that's desired to have continuity. They want to control the masses. So yeah, I mean, in almost any religion, there's a degree of spirituality and mysticism, but that's not the main emphasis because, again, power, money, control, influence, takes control, and all of a sudden, man's and God, God and man's image, is a big control mechanism to have.
That is profound. God's and man's image versus
Yeah,
the other way. Yeah.
right. Yeah, we've just projected our own values, our own belief systems onto God, and that's the creation that we have. And so again, that belief is so pivotal in our behaviors. And what near-death experience come back with 9 times out of 10, when it's a euphoric, genuine end to ease, that God is not vengeful or full of wrath or full of hate, but the embodiment of unconditional love, warmth, acceptance, understanding. And so that is something that near death experiencers will oftentimes, 9 times out of 10, state. So I'll go with that versus people who have written books that really are based in, political control and social control, um, mechanisms, instead of something that people don't have really anything to gain from unless, you're on the Oprah Winfrey show back in the day. Most times authors, we really, don't make much and probably spend a lot more than what we get back. So it's not about financial reasons, nor is it about acceptance because we go through a great deal of ridicule. It is just about bringing forward the truth, and that is our job. Because as Pablo Picasso said, the purpose of life is to find your gift, and the meaning of life is to give it away. And maybe I'm saying it in the opposite way, but I think for all of us, we all have a gift, and sometimes we don't really recognize what it is. And for many years, the near-death experience felt like a curse more than a gift. But once I recognized the value, that it wasn't something that I was to hold on to, but the value was that it was in giving it away, and it wasn't really about me. That's when it took on a whole new form and transformed from a burden to a blessing.
I remember one time, a long time ago, I heard that from the priest with whom I was discussing
Mm.
this, the topic of being able to see and understand a near-death experiences, of course, of past lives. He was pretty open to everything, and he used to be in his civilian life the head of the
Wow.
psychiatry department before, and then he
Mm.
became a priest. But then also he said it can be a gift and it can be a curse at the same time.
Mm. Oh yeah, yeah. No, absolutely, and that's an interesting dynamic. Working, in the mental health field and then working in clergy. Interesting. Normally, they would. I hear priests starting, there, then they'll transfer themselves maybe into the mental health field. So that's
Interesting,
interesting.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was so profound that he actually did that. But that was a calling for him. He
Oh yeah,
heard that calling. He
that's it.
dropped his profession, and he became essentially um, the person to treat the human souls through spirituality, through religion. And I really respected him for that because he was not a dogmatic person.
Wow.
Um, with your work with people that you do for the past life regression, what is the main goal that people come to you? Or do you suggest to use that um, mode in order to dive into the subconscious in order to understand their problems? Or do they come to you already ready to experience that?
It depends. I mean, some people are just kind of curious. It's more of an entertainment thing where they just kind of are curious as to who they were. The unfortunate part, comes when there's expectations that people have in their mind that they were, I don't know, somehow Cleopatra, and I have to just say, which one were you? There are about 6 or 7 of them, So most people think there's something regal or somewhat of influence. Again, that's kind of like the ego structure that we have to be just a significant, prominent figure. But in reality, most of our lives are just kind of average lives. We have a pitchfork in our hand. We're working the land. A lot of times it's not, just super memorable. But again, that's a part of our soul's journey for whatever reason. But here and there, what surprises me is people have memories of planets, of lifetimes not on this planet, but of other forms, and that is something that I didn't expect to kind of hear, where people had memories of their lives in different interplanetary existences, which is pretty fascinating to me. But I would say a lot of times people may come to me with maybe relationship issues where they're just not sure of a certain blockage in relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe sometimes there's a health related issue that people will come to the office for. Sometimes it's a greater understanding of who am I, why am I here, what's my soul's purpose. They're trying to be, doing detective work to make some of the pieces of the puzzle together, to really understand and pinpoint, why we're here, what are some of the themes in my life, as well as also, discovering some of the greater gifts that we've garnered through different lifetimes that we could cultivate, in this lifetime, such as our artistic ability or counseling ability or warrior spirit that we have, or athleticism that we might have had in other lifetimes. So it's pretty fascinating to see maybe some of the gifts that we have that are related to other lifetimes. But some things you just can't teach in one lifetime. I mean, Mozart playing the piano at a young age is not something that you could possibly teach. That's something that would take hundreds of lifetimes to really, make. So some things logically just don't make sense within the ability to perform at their own level in this lifetime. I think your microphone is off. Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I think your mic went out. You have to click your mic. Yeah.
Mm. Yes,
Oh, there we are.
some technical issue. I don't understand why that happened
All good. All
by
good.
itself. Yeah. So What are the people's responses? Did you have any profound realizations that people came out of hypnosis and said, wow, this is, I didn't know that, and now I can apply into my life, and that makes sense what's been happening in my life? Did you
Yeah,
have
well,
that?
I had someone who came to my office who remembered a lifetime in which they knew biblical Jacob, which is pretty profound. And they
Mm,
actually wrote a chapter in a book about, that just came out, um, about that hypnosis session. So they just remembered a life, I guess, in ancient Egypt where they knew, biblical Jacob. They were connected to Jacob, yeah, as well as his son Joseph, who, worked very closely with the Pharaoh at the time. And I suppose he was the Pharaoh's astrologer, from my understanding, and dream interpreter, actually, the dream interpretation that he had. I'm not sure about the astrology part. My Bible studies are a little bit rusty as of now, but I should know my proverbial son and what he was doing. Uh, but at the very least, they said Joseph was one of the best looking men in history. But I say Jacob is better. No, I'm just messing. But but
of course.
no, no, no. But yeah. But that was pretty profound. Like I said, the intergalactical memories that people had, was pretty profound. Some types of phobias that people had, were healed throughout the different regressions that I've done.
For
Um,
example, which ones?
there's a lot of like fear of water, fear of fire that people had, fear of going on trains. And so some of those were kind of healed through past lives. A lot of times when, I'm a big believer in science to a degree, which
Mhm.
states that if you look at anything closely enough, it has an explanation, except for really God in a way, or spirituality. And from a mental health perspective, I'm the same way. But what's limited in mental health is that this isn't all there is, and we have other memories that go beyond our conscious understanding. And that's when hypnosis plays a role, where it's able to really tap into things that we're not understanding through the subconscious that are interfering with the conscious mind.
Yes, I must agree with that because I myself found the reason for my unexplained claustrophobia and the fear of heights
Mm-hmm,
in the past, centuries back lives. And what was so interesting is that, well, consciously we don't understand that, but our soul remembers those experiences. And of
mm-hmm,
course, now in this life, there would be the remnants of fears from those
mm-hmm,
times. And what's important is important to understand it on the conscious level, and also on the not just the conscious level, but to be able to resolve it while you're still
mm-hmm.
there in hypnosis, to understand it, that it was from before and has nothing to do with you right now.
Oh, sure. And, some errors are bigger than others, like ancient Egypt. I had a colleague of mine who was, and this happened to me something similar. We were doing like a group regression. And during the group, people got out of the regression and immediately pointed at each other and they said, I saw you, I saw you. So they were in the room doing the regression. They simultaneously had recollection that they were with each other during the same lifetime. And they both intuitively simultaneously knew that. So that was, I would say, one of the coolest things that I've seen, in experience. But also, I mean, some eras are bigger than others, and most people probably have had lifetimes in ancient Egypt because it's one of the longest, historical periods. But I think a lot of people that I regress go back to wars, and it's just amazing how we're still in 2024 and the planet is still, having these things after all this time. Uh, but a lot of people have memories in wars, and that could lead itself to trauma. And then there's healing and getting out of fight or flight that people might have, and understanding that that was then, this is now, and there you could find peace, and people aren't trying to blow your heads off. Depending on what part of the world that you're in, some of that could be justified of this life, for sure too.
Oh yes, yes. But what, if you don't mind sharing with us, were your past life experiences personal?
A lot of them are written in my book, but the most, recent that I really publicly share was in a life in which I worked, as some sort of religious teacher. And there just came like a spiraling of events. Some would call it the hubris in the English language, but just what hit the fan, and I was just in a corner, and there was no hope that I had. And I just remembered from that moment, I took my own life and completed suicide. And this has been proven by different intuitives who have read for me prior to me ever going public, or saying a word. And so that was pretty profound. But I also think my near death experience had a lot of parallels with that lifetime. In a sense, when I had my near death experience, I was in this similar situation where I felt like there's nothing to hold on to. All hope was lost, and that was kind of it. And then I just surrendered rather than resisted what was going on. And I surrendered to the eternal power of God and of spirit, and that allowed me to just transcend, this infinite pain and suffocation that I was experiencing. And once my human breath was taken from me, I was able to surrender to the breath of eternity, some would call as God, or the breath of creation. And that was something that, prevailed my own physical death at the time. And so it was just a lesson for me of the power of surrender and understanding what suffering is, which is just, my ability to look at it, right in the face, the ultimate fear that we have in death, and seeing beyond our biggest fears lies, the greatest freedom, the greatest light, the greatest eternal truth. And so I think we could find things by going through it, not running away from it, and surrendering to a force inside of us that allows us to, flow through and navigate, some of these points that we feel are paralysis.
Speaking about paralysis, what would be your advice to people who are probably sitting on the edge, maybe leading toward hypnosis, maybe finding out what they were in the past lives, but not exactly going actively and seeking that, or they're looking for the information about themselves. They're asking questions, but not really moving forward with it. What would be your advice to them?
Yeah, well, I would say there's a beauty in being curious. I mean, if you look at the planet right now, and some people believe in that notion that the planet is flat, but the majority of people do believe the planet is round. My shirt kind of looks like the planet Earth right now, but I'll give that analogy where if you're daring enough to explore, you could find, things that are different than what you see in a whole new world than what you thought was possible. But it's through by challenging those bounds and stretching those bounds that you can find new realities. And so I think it's important for people to become vulnerable, to become daring enough to search other different realities than what we know, and that's how we could find other truths at hand. Most people are comfortable knowing what they know and kind of fearing what they don't know. That's why you lead to a lot of stagnation. So I think what's important is to get comfortable with being uncomfortable and being able to be a constant, in constant search of something more that you know. And that's really, Buddhism, that's called the beginner's mind, so to speak. But that's really where life begins, that place of openness, curiosity, exploration. That's when you can find new lands and new pathways of understanding and getting past through stagnation. That's by being curious, being open, being childlike in how you see the world versus just kind of stagnant and not really shifting your views year in and year out. And so each year you want to come, each day rather, you want to come back, with more awareness and wake up better than we went to bed last night. But sadly, most people are just living maybe 99 years one time instead of 99 different years.
That is profound. Exactly. Exactly. Yes, we think that we are on this earth and this is what it is. We are in our bodies and there's nothing else. And whatever we rationalize to ourselves, this is who we are, and this is what the world is all about, without even asking questions. But I would also encourage people to ask and essentially to learn about yourself. We can learn about the world around us, but rarely do we learn about ourselves and our dreams. Our dreams, like Jacob had a dream, that you, Jacob, had a dream also, right? That leads to personal exploration, and that is a well of information that may lead to some profound realizations that we have not had previously. So I would encourage people to dive in and listen to their soul. And soul speaks through the dreams and through the different symbology in our lives. So do listen to that. Um, well, if people wanted to find you and work with you, there are the links, in fact, that are underneath that you could find Jacob if you wanted to work with him or interested in past life regression or anything that he does for that regard, and also the links to his books,
Mhm.
because it looks like we have touched upon certain experiences, but there are much more to uh, find out and much more to read, and that information is in your books, Jacob. So please buy his books. You're going to be positively enlightened and to know about yourself as well. Well, our it's the evening. What is it? Can you imagine? Yes. Our episode is coming to an end already, and I am so glad, Jacob, that you joined us today. I know that it's been several times that we tried to get together and talk about it, but I'm glad that we've finally done it, because I've learned a lot also as well, and also the listeners and the viewers also. So thank you so much for coming, and I do hope that we can meet again to talk more about your future research
Mhm.
and current as well, because there's not enough time in an hour to cover everything that you have discovered. So thank you so much for doing this work that you do with people.
Oh,
Thank you for
thank
giving
you.
away. We need to give away more than we receive. This is my motto. So thank you very much. And thank you all of you listeners and viewers for joining us today. Please support us on different platforms on YouTube, like us, and share, please, because we are here to provide all this information for you. Well, thank you and have a fantastic night. Thank you,
Thank
Jacob.
you.
Goodbye,
Thank you.
everyone. Good night.